My name is Yaiza, and I was born in Spain. And when I was 8 years old, I moved to Canada. And then when I was 11, I moved to Mexico. And then at 18, I came back to Canada for my undergrad. And now I'm in my last semester. Aside from my visual art practice, I also make music. I've been recording and producing my own music since I was 15. I also make my own music videos. And I think that's where I really get to experiment and have fun with things like filmmaking and more visual arts, because, for example, I make my own props and outfits and things like that. I don't know if I always wanted to be an artist, but I was definitely always making art. My parents are architects, and my family used to own like a stationery store. And as a kid, I didn't really watch TV, so I always grew up with the time and space to create. Currently in my house, we have like a big pile of the drawings that I made from when I was really little to like 8, and my parents kept everything. And I think this is just an example of how I've always been encouraged to be creative and make art. Originally, I actually wanted to be a filmmaker, and I wanted to go to film school, but I ended up doing a Bachelor of Fine Arts instead. And I think it was the right decision, because ultimately fine arts kind of encompasses more things, including filmmaking. So I get to do filmmaking within my practice, but I feel like I have a broader vision of just the arts in general. I also feel like I went through a lot of mediums when I was really young. We had computers at home, and my parents taught me how to use AutoCAD when I was like 6. Growing up in the early 2000s, we weren't on the internet as much as kids are now. So I used to love things like Microsoft Word, just seeing what I could come up with in terms of like mixing different fonts and word art and things like that. In Excel, I would fill in different cells with different colors to create an image. So it was kind of like pixel art. Actually, something that I've been trying to do in my practice recently is going back to those mediums that I used to use as a kid. So for example, when my parents would buy me stickers, I would use all the stickers on the sheet to make something. And even that combination of digital art, printing it out and then doing something on it, and also doing some drawings on Excel, has been really inspiring lately. As a kid, I also went through all the stages of art history. So for the first 4 ever, I made religious artworks, and I would depict like biblical scenes. I have one of the creation of the world, I have one of Adam and Eve. And then throughout my teen years, I was doing what all the other artsy teens were doing, which is like the more edgy symbolism, surrealism kind of works. And now I've settled into a more contemporary art practice. It's hard for me to describe what mediums exactly I use, because I think that each individual idea requires its own medium. I get my ideas first, and that certain ideas require certain things, and that pushes me to try new things. So for example, I had an idea to make an artwork made of soap, and I've never made soap before. And lately I've also been exploring fashion and accessories, so things like rings and watches, and I made like a tie with pockets. Another unusual medium that I like to work with is exhibitions as a medium, like exhibitions as the artwork itself. So I've done a couple exhibitions where it is the fact that the work is being exhibited that is the message. So one of them is, this exhibition is on my CV, and it's just a regular exhibition of all my works, but the works are covered up. So it's kind of playing on that idea that as artists, we need to exhibit, and the more exhibitions we have on our CV, the better. My exhibition is kind of a critique on that, saying like, okay, I have an exhibition, but nobody's actually saw the works. So when an artist needs to exhibit, is it more transactional? Is it just about the fact that you exhibited, or is it actually about who sees the work and how many people see the work? Because I wanted to go into filmmaking, I would say that cameras are very much my thing. So I've been exploring this new medium of 3D scanning. It's like super easy and accessible, but I see that as a kind of 3D photography, and it's so revolutionary. I think it's 3D photography because, first of all, it literally is, but also the scenes that you can capture with 3D scanning are very similar to the scenes that you can capture as a photographer. All the daily moments and kind of unexpected things, it takes a longer time than just pressing the shutter, but you can get very artsy with it. Within 3D scanning, there's also a lot of things that could go wrong in the process, but I think that this is part of the charm. You know, it's kind of like when in film photography you get a leak or something like that, where it's just cool. And people will often experiment with expired film because we like accidents. I just think it just has so much potential as a medium. I would say that mostly my artworks are social commentary, and within that I like to talk about things like capitalism, gender issues, and environmental issues. I think those are my top 3. And I've also been thinking about my personal history and my childhood and things like that. I also really like making art about art itself and the art world and creativity and things like that. Almost everybody knows about the banana taped to the wall that sold for like $100,000 or something like that. Everybody's always talking about how that's not art, how could it sell for that much? It's like this big scandal. And people don't like it because it's just the banana taped to the wall. So what I did was I did a traditional painting of the same subjects, which is the banana and the tape, and I did it in a traditional still life. In a very classic style. By using a traditional medium like painting, which requires more time, skill, and labor than just taping a banana to the wall, is it more valuable? Is it worth more? Could my painting sell for $100,000? Why and why not? Or do we simply just not think that bananas and tape are a worthy art subject? What makes a worthy art subject? I really like when my work prompts the viewer to ask questions. I definitely describe my practice as fun. I think that a lot of the times my artworks end up having a punchline. My sculpture, Chair for Men, is based on a tweet that says, men act insane because they're not eating sandwiches on steel beams anymore. So I like to keep it really simple, but talk about bigger topics. I am also really interested in exploring the connections between our world and the digital world. We all know that the digital world plays such a big part in our lives. As artists, we've always represented the world around us, usually landscapes, portraits, still lives. It's the things that are around us in our real world. But now, there's a different world, a parallel one, which is the digital one, the internet. People think that the internet isn't special, but I think it very much is. The internet shows you everything that's happening in the world, and it shows you what people are thinking, whether it's explicitly or implicitly. You can tell so much about society just by looking at the internet. I get all my ideas from the daily vernacular world. I like looking at daily life things like clothing and cooking and transit, and obviously the internet. Currently, I just finished a series of silk screen prints for a printmaking portfolio exchange, which when we were assigned that project, I thought was very much like a potluck because we each bring something to share with everybody else. So I thought for the exchange, I could bring my own dish from Spain, which is paella. So I printed basically a paella, and I tried to make it like a 3D object where the back of the print is the pan that it's cooked on, and then it's covered with a cloth because it's an important part of the cooking process. The process of screen printing was very much like the process of cooking, where you do it layer by layer and step by step. You slowly add the ingredients as layers, and you add more color, and it gets more cooked. So I think that's just one example of how my ideas come from the prompt or the assignment sometimes, and the medium. Currently, I'm working on a photography project that's going to be basically stock photos, like the ones that you see online, like weird stock photos, like for example, like the grandma with the gun. And each photo is illustrating about 7 to 8 stories that I have about homophobia. And I think this is actually my first personal autobiographical project. Stock photos got my attention because I worked at a stock photo company for a little bit, and I became aware of their artistic elements. Like, there's so much work that goes into making a stock photo that we don't think about. Stock photos have to be perfect because they're very commercial. I like that they're so dramatic and yet flat. I think that they have so much potential in the art world, and it's a little bit kind of untapped territory. Their commercial nature means that they have to be relatable to some extent. So that's kind of why I picked them for this project, is because we all have very similar experiences. I think that when you're a minority, one of the most important things is seeking community, and that's what I hope to do with this project. I think that people who are going through similar things can find a way to relate to the photos and the stories, and ultimately seeing someone else's experience is going to help them process what they're going through.